Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. I'm Zach Ewing, joined today by Wilson Alexander, our football beat writer for LSU football at The Advocate. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays season. I know a lot of people are already off work and everybody else probably kind of finishing up today like us, Wilson. So we thought it was a good time, especially with the dead period starting for transfer visits. I believe it started at midnight yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. So not that a commitment couldn't come, but it's kind of a good point to reset and look at LSU's haul in the transfer portal.
Absolutely. And quite a haul it has been so far. LSU's got the number 2 ranked class according to 24/7 Sports. It's got 13 players in the class, 12 who are officially signed, one who's committed. And yet, and they're probably not done yet either. There's still a few positions that they want to add to here. They've been aggressive. They've been getting top players, at least in the transfer sort of rankings that you see, which is a good thing for them as they head into the 2025 season. And we'll just kind of have to see as things play out whether or not this is going to really make a difference on next year's team, like if it's going to catapult LSU into championship contention. That is just something that you can't even predict, even if the rankings look good. But it's still a class that, LSU has said it wanted to be aggressive in the portal, and it really has been.
Yeah, I mean, all you can do is try to gain more through the portal than you lost. And I think certainly to this point, LSU has managed to do that. And like you say, maybe more to come. So we're going to talk about some of the additions they've made just in the last week since the last time we talked about this. Also, maybe talk about a couple of guys who have left and what LSU may still be shopping for. We'll also hit on the Texas Bowl, which is coming up, and our reaction to the first round of the CFP. So all that to come ahead on today's show, which is proudly sponsored by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. We're going to take a break, 60 seconds, and we will be back and start diving into the transfer portal right after this.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
All right, back on the LSU Sports Insider, talking transfer portal. It just continues to churn, Wilson. I mean, it just seems like every day tracking another announcement is kind of a grind. And I think the coaches and the reporters, the beat writers around the country will appreciate this dead period coming up that lasts through the end of the year. But LSU's most recent addition, I don't know if he's the best player in their transfer portal class, but he's pretty close. He's got to be in the conversation. And that's Patrick Payton. He's a Florida State edge rusher, 16 career sacks, a starter at FSU. I mean, a guy who LSU really should be able to kind of plug and play on its D-line.
Yeah, somebody who, he instantly comes in as the most accomplished and productive edge rusher that LSU has. He's got 110 career tackles in 3 seasons. He was the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year back in 2022. And he is somebody who certainly has a lot of potential. In 2023, when Florida State went undefeated in the regular season, he had a really good year. And it was kind of expected that he'd take a step forward and that Florida State as a team would continue to be good. And obviously Florida State was, abysmal. And he didn't have the best year. Really the second half of the season, he didn't even have a sack. Ended up with 4 on the season. And so now he's kind of going elsewhere. And LSU's going to hope here with some coaching from Kevin Peoples there on the edge that he can kind of take that step back into being really one of the country's elite pass rushers. That's going to be the hope here. Because, LSU's now signed 3 edge defenders with him, Jack Pyburn, and Jamari Butler. And Pyburn has not really shown much as a pass rusher during his career. Maybe it's something that LSU can kind of bring out of him. It certainly seems to be what he hopes to be able to do. but it's also, he's somebody who's really good at setting the edge, has shown some good stuff as a run defender. Then you got Butler, who's kind of in the middle of the two in that he's done more as a pass rusher, but he's not up to Payton's level in terms of previous production. And then here with Payton, LSU, as we know, really needed to go and get edge players who can make a difference right away. The only person who really had a significant role on this team coming back next year is freshman Gabriel Relaford. Now, while Relaford would be expected to have a role on next year's team, like, you needed a lot more around him while you continue to kind of build up the depth behind him. And now you got three guys, all who have 1 year of eligibility left to complement Gabriel Relaford. And LSU is going to, really rely on all three of these guys. Like, these are instant impact players. We'll see exactly how much of a difference they make, but like, they're going to be a big part of this team next year because of the position that they play, the roles that they are filling on this team, because LSU had so much to replace there in terms of production at the defensive end spot.
Yeah, and then 100%. I mean, outside of quarterback, and I guess you could argue maybe wide receiver, it's hard to make a bigger impact than a good edge rusher can make on the team. I mean, it can transform your entire defense and really change things. You mentioned national championship aspirations. I mean, I don't think we're there yet for LSU, but certainly having a productive pass rush is one of the things that gets you into that conversation. So, but speaking of wide receivers, another one of their big portal additions over the last week, I think we last had a podcast on this last Monday, and then Nick Anderson, the Oklahoma transfer, I believe, transferred in Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. And he's another SEC, Adam Tiberian Brown, who we talked about last week from Kentucky. Nick Anderson set the Oklahoma freshman record in 2023 for receiving yards. Then he missed last season with an injury. And so this is today's injury report brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic. But, Wilson, obviously, if Nick Anderson is expected to be a full go for next year, which at this point he is, this is an impact player on the offensive side of the ball.
He's 6'4", like you said, 10 touchdowns as a freshman at Oklahoma, where he had almost 800 yards. And not just that, like, he was a guy who was stretching the field. I mean, his average depth of target during that 2023 season was about 16 yards. He was picking up a lot of yardage after the catch. And he's not going to be LSU's fastest receiver. When Varian Brown's, I think, has probably more speed. Jelani Watkins, freshman who didn't play much this year, but he's got a ton of speed. Like, LSU's got a lot of speed at receiver. Nick Anderson might not be the fastest of those guys, but he's got enough speed to be able to create separation and stretch the field. At least that's what he showed on tape as a freshman in 2023. Like you said, this past year, he was expected to do even more than that. Maybe he takes a jump into being a 1,000-yard receiver, leads Oklahoma's offense in terms of, production and kind of being their main target. And then he suffers an injury in camp. Brent Venables described it as an oblique injury. He ends up only playing 5 snaps all season. And like, those all came in one game where he tried to go against Tennessee, lasted 5 plays, had to come out. We didn't see him again. And so, but he's a guy who's, I think he's number 11 or 12 on ESPN's top 50 transfer portal rankings. And so you bring in him and you bring in Varian Brown, who is like number 7 on those. You've got 2 of the top 5 receivers available in the portal and 2 of the top, 12 players right there. In addition to some other guys who we'll talk about, Mansour Delane, who's in that conversation, and Patrick Payton was as well. He's a top 15 guy on the ESPN transfer rankings. And so LSU has gone and gotten like top available players, which they really didn't do last year. Last year, they were ranked number 43 in the country in their transfer portal class. And this is a big jump up from that, kind of a return to where LSU had been at the very beginning of Brian Kelly's tenure in terms of how they transferred portal, trying to get a lot of guys, but also they've been much more aggressive with the top players available in the portal. And Nick Anderson is another one of those. I mean, this is a big addition for LSU's team. If he can get back to what he showed as a freshman, the key for him is just going to be health.
Yeah, and to that end, Wilson, do you have any sense? I mean, I assume after missing a full season, he expects to be ready for the spring, but it's kind of a weird injury. It's been described as an upper quadriceps tear, also a hip injury, and you mentioned the oblique. It's kind of all in that area. Could be a lot of stuff. None of it probably good for a guy who has to pivot and things.
Did I say oblique? I meant quadriceps. My apologies. Yeah. I don't know exactly where he's at in his recovery because it was so vague when he was at Oklahoma too. And so I think we'll kind of have to see as we get closer to spring ball what his availability is for that. I think the expectation would be that he's ready for the season. I just don't know what it means for spring practice and for off-season workouts and that kind of thing yet. We'll need to get more of an answer on that. in the coming weeks here, and in probably early next year too, sort of where he's at in terms of his recovery. Because like we said, he missed the whole season for Oklahoma, so it certainly was significant enough to sideline him over there. But yeah, I meant to say quadriceps. Got my body parts mixed up. My muscular terms there jumbled.
There's only so many muscles that have a Q in them, so it's no. But I mean, it's all kind of and if you look at headlines, there were times when it seemed like Oklahoma reporters expected him back, and then he would just get pushed back more, and it turned into one of these things where he misses the whole season. And so we don't know the exact status, but we will find out. And obviously, LSU felt comfortable enough with it to bring him aboard. Today's show is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic and the Injury Report, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care, specialist services, or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. And then the third guy we really wanted to highlight, Wilson, you mentioned him in passing, but Mansour Delane, proven cornerback, can also kind of move into the slot and, maybe even play a little safety. I mean, very versatile player, played multiple positions at Virginia Tech. He's racked up some big time career numbers. This is a guy that LSU didn't have last year, a really experienced hand in that cornerback room.
Yeah, this is somebody who, when we talk about who's going to be LSU's most impactful transfer, he's going to be in that conversation as well. He's got, 146 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 6 interceptions, 4 forced fumbles, 16 pass breakups, and he started 29 games at Virginia Tech. He is also somebody who LSU's coaches believe can play multiple spots in the secondary. He showed it a little bit at Virginia Tech. But I think the thing in the offseason with him is just going to be figuring out, okay, where exactly do we play this guy? Because Brian Kelly was asked about him during his press conference on Saturday, and he said they'd be happy if he just plays corner and is a lockdown corner. But they also could see a situation here where, like you said, he plays nickel or he plays safety. It might depend on some of what LSU finishes getting in the portal, frankly. Well, I think Kelly sort of confirmed, basically, as I think a lot of us can see, is that the last 2 positions, and we'll talk about this more, that they're going after is offensive line and the back end of the defense, those DBs. If they can get some other sort of proven safety types, then maybe Mansour is able to just play corner. But if they need him back at safety, then he might be an option back there. And that's definitely a good thing for this defense, because safety is one of the biggest things most important things that they needed in the transfer portal. They just have not been very good back there. And he's the last few years, really, it hasn't been a position of strength. And so Mansour can certainly come in and help with the secondary in general, either at corner or at safety. I think this is going to be one of their most important additions that they've made here in the portal cycle.
You ever played gin rummy?
Oh, yes. My grandmother taught me when I was 3.
So like Mansour reminds me of, you get a card and you're like, well, now I have 2 9s, but I also have a 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm not sure where this is going to fit, but it's going to be useful. Like that's what
exactly. You want it in your hand.
Right. Exactly. So
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, I've been playing that game for most of my life.
We got to sit down and have a game at some point, because I love gin. Okay, so Mansour Delane, Nick Anderson, Patrick Payton, I would say the 3 biggest additions, at least in the last week for LSU. They are our star players, and today's star player segment is sponsored by Waste Pro. Ensure your tailgate or event is a hit with clean and convenient portable toilets from Waste Pro. Rent yours today. But having said that, Wilson, Payton, Anderson, Delane, certainly not the only 3 guys in the transfer portal. There's been a lot of comings and goings, and I guess we can start with the outbound. Sage Ryan and Deshaun Womack are both Ole Miss Rebels, which is interesting. They'll be hosting LSU next year in Oxford. And then on the others, also AJ Swan entered the transfer portal, which I guess is not surprising after LSU added another quarterback in Michael Van Buren last week. So again, the portal's open through December the 28th, and then also for 5 days after your bowl game. So some of these LSU players could play in the Texas Bowl, and then they have 5 more days to enter the portal after that. So still could be some departures, but LSU's also still adding. They have 13 players now. They added a punter, which I don't know that is going to excite anyone, but you need a good punter, and they seem to have found a good one.
Grant Chadwick.
Yeah, there you go. And they've also added some depth along the offensive and defensive line. So who else sticks out to you in terms of additions?
Well, 2 in particular, Chadwick, and I'll explain why, because like you said, why a punter? and then Braylon Moore. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention him. Offensive lineman from Virginia Tech. This is the guy who's probably going to come in and start for LSU next year, either at center or guard. He's played both. We'll start with Chadwick. Chadwick is, I think, important. When I did a thing going into the opening of the transfer portal, what positions LSU needed to target. Punter was one of them. It was at the bottom of the list because people don't think about it as much. But LSU, maybe punting wasn't as much of an issue as we thought it was going to be this season when we watched them punt in the preseason. And there were some times when they were balls getting shanked onto opposite fields. We didn't see that, but they weren't flipping the field with their punts. LSU finished last in the SEC at 39.7 yards per punt on average, with a combination of Payton Todd and Blake Oschendorf. And possibly some of that is also, prioritizing directional punting. But either way, LSU needed to get better at punter. And so they brought in Grant Chadwick from Middle Tennessee State. As a freshman this year, he averaged 43.4 yards per punt. So we'll see kind of what he can bring to that position. That could end up being an important signing if LSU is able to flip the field and impact games in the punting realm, I guess. Then that'll be important for this team next year. But then Braylon Moore, he started 12 games in each of the last 2 seasons for Virginia Tech. And he's played, like I said, both center and guard. And so LSU, as we all know, this is 4 offensive linemen starting on this team are going to be gone next year. And you needed, I think, particularly help on the interior. Well, you needed help probably everywhere. But, because he could play center, then maybe you can move DJ Chester over to guard. DJ Chester in his redshirt freshman season at center wasn't consistent enough, had some issues with some of the blocking and things like that there at that spot. And so maybe it could be better for him to play guard. We'll kind of see how that shakes out there in the spring. LSU will probably practice at times with either one of them at center and kind of get them experience. Brad Davis, as we all know, who's been following LSU for the last few years, he likes to cross train. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that we see in practice, is both of them getting center reps. But then maybe more ends up sticking there, because then that's somebody really experienced right in the middle of your offensive line who's played a lot of games. And so those two would stand out to me as well within the past week or so. Yeah, when we did the first one of these, LSU had signed, or I guess gotten commitments from 6. They're now over the past week another 7. So yeah, right about half of the class was done then, and now we've gotten about the same number or so since then, and those would stick out to me.
Yeah, 100%. And like you talk about a punter, and I was fully committed to the bit by then forgetting his name as I was trying to introduce him. But these hidden yards, right? I mean, LSU lost games last year. Like, I'm thinking at Florida, maybe even USC, where you look at the box screen. Well, how did they lose that game? They should have won that game. Sometimes those hidden yards in the field position can change games like that. And so, bringing a weapon at punter. I'm not saying he's going to, win you a championship or make the playoff for you, but he can certainly help flip some of those close games. So, good additions for LSU. And then obviously we talk about the offensive line, crucial, and maybe a spot for our next segment, which is going to be where LSU needs to continue to add in the portal. We're going to go shopping with Wilson Alexander right after this. We're also going to mention the Texas Bowl just a bit and our reactions to the first round of the college football playoffs. So stick with us.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional healthcare for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You give me love.
Since 1988, Classic Industrial Services, Inc. has led the industry in specialty contracting. From thermal insulation to scaffolding, coatings, and beyond, we cover it all. Every minute matters in our commitment to quality and safety. We're here to serve with roofing, siding, heat trace, and refractory services. Visit classicindustrial.com for more information.
All right, welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider. Zach Ewing with Wilson Alexander here for you. We're going to do a little shopping. First, I want to let you know you should subscribe to the LSU Sports at NOLA.com YouTube channel. I would tell you that it makes a great Christmas gift, but it's absolutely free. All you have to do is click that button underneath this show. And so it doesn't make a very good gift, but it is something you should do in time.
You know, the person you give it to doesn't have to know that.
That is true. That is true. You could say, look, I'm just showing this to you. The information is the gift. By the way, if you do actually want a gift, theadvocate.com/subscribe, and you can get access to all of Wilson's reports throughout. Well, I say throughout the week, but really this is like a 365-day-a-year thing now, where we're following LSU football. There is no off season in college football, so you can get access to all of that at theadvocate.com/subscribe. So check that out. All right, so we're going to go shopping with Wilson Alexander. Today's shopping segment is proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. And Wilson, what we're talking about is what LSU still needs. I mentioned this earlier. Players can still enter the portal through Saturday, December the 28th, and then after each individual team's bowl game, their players get 5 additional days to then enter the portal. There's also a spring portal season, but we'll leave that for the spring. So just focusing on this now, and again, we don't know. LSU could have a few more players leave between now and Saturday or after the bowl game. But knowing what we know now, Wilson, where is LSU still targeting, and what do they still need?
The two main spots are offensive line and safety. LSU has recently hosted a few players at both of those positions. There's a University of South Florida safety whose name I am going to mess up, and I apologize for that in advance, but I believe it's Taifik Bayard. He has been a starter there, and so that's someone who LSU has been in the mix with for potential safety. So he was on campus, I think, just earlier this past week. The days are running together, so please forgive me, but I believe he was there on Tuesday. And the then there's 2 offensive linemen who they've been in the mix with. Josh Thompson from Northwestern, and then Fa'amo is how you say his last name. Faili Fa'amo, I believe is how it's pronounced, from Washington State, a guy who's played right tackle there for a couple of years and is one of the top offensive tackles in the transfer portal. Pretty consistently across the board. When you look at rankings, whether it's 24/7 or ESPN, he's very highly regarded as an offensive tackle. Now he's got certainly multiple suitors, and Thompson does as well. But Fa'amo would probably be the more difficult player to land because there's going to be a lot of interest in him, and there has been, I should say. And so those are some guys to watch for right now. LSU's been getting a minute, like you said, that period's coming up, but there's visits that they kind of got a bunch of in before the weekend started. They've been, that coaching staff has been going out to dinner, taking guys out, hosting visits for like 2 weeks straight, basically. And that finally is going to kind of slow down for a second. They're going to get a chance to catch their breath, especially because they've almost got this class filled out. Brian Kelly said that they would add, he was asked about it on Saturday. He originally said 12, up that number to closer to 15 were his words. And so that ends up being kind of the target number. Then they've got maybe 2 more, maybe 3 that they'll take. And so they're getting pretty close to kind of finishing up what they hope to do in this transfer portal window. And offensive line and safety would be the positions that are left to add.
Yeah, and I mean, if you don't add anything else, this has still been obviously a successful portal season. But after the shelves are a little bit restocked after this dead period, after the holidays, may have a few more additions down the road. Coaches know about those. If there's a kid rumored to be from a bowl team entering the portal after he plays his team's bowl game, Brian Kelly probably is aware of that and maybe waiting to save a couple spots for that. He's more aware of that than we are, for sure. So that is our shopping segment. It's brought to you by Associated Grocers. Tiger fans, Associated Grocers is hiring. Join a team committed to the success of independent retail grocers. Apply today at Associated Grocers and be part of something great. Okay.
The other thing real quick that I'll be interested to see is if between now and the start of next season, they try to add another tight end. Because right now you've got 3 scholarship tight ends going into next year. with Trades Green, JD LaFleur, freshman signee, and then Bauer Sharp, the tight end from Oklahoma, who we talked about last week. That's a little bit thin at that position. I think they'd probably like to have one more. So I'm curious to see just if that's something that they end up trying to do between now and August, basically. Like that, maybe it comes back up again in the spring portal window. But that would be another position just to kind of maybe keep an eye on.
Yeah, and again, this is a fluid situation. LSU could have other players enter the portal as well after the bowl game or in the spring, and so then other needs pop up. It's never a dull moment. We did want to mention one more thing. We are waiting probably the biggest news to come out of LSU football this week, maybe Harold Perkins' decision whether to enter the NFL draft or not. So that may be coming up. We'll keep an eye on that. And then, of course, Wilson, the Texas Bowl's coming up. It's kind of sneaks up on you with all of the portal talk, but it's a week from tomorrow. And so let's just spend a moment touching on that. And it's interesting, and this is going to be our sports betting segment, which is proudly sponsored by the Queen of Baton Rouge. Experience the thrill of game day at 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails, your premier destination for elevated sports entertainment. It's interesting, Wilson. Baylor is now favored in this game as we look at sports betting. They're favored by 1.5. A lot of times with bowl games, motivation is a huge driving factor. And the betting lines try to reflect that, whether one team wants more than the other team, they got more starters playing, et cetera, et cetera. I don't get the sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't get the sense LSU is sort of forgetting about this game. I mean, I think they want to win. The betting line, they are missing several offensive line starters, so we'll see. But Garrett Nussmeier's playing. A lot of their top weapons are playing. Their top defenders are playing. So I don't know. What sense do you get from LSU heading into this game?
Yeah, I think the sense is that like the players who are playing in this game, they want to win. You know, like you got Garrett Nussmeier coming back for next year. Garrett's one of the more competitive people I've talked to, over the past year. Like he is going to want to win this game. Whit Weeks is coming back next year, and he's going to want to win this game. There's a lot of guys who are going to be on next year's team who are playing in this game, and they want to win. But the thing is, what you said, which is that there are a bunch of players from this. There were key parts of this team this year who aren't playing. And so there could be some moments where you got like a freshman or maybe a first-time starter out on the field, and they could make a mistake in a key situation or something like that, which is why I think that it makes sense for Baylor to be favored. I don't know that they're missing as much as LSU might be. LSU, first of all, on the offensive line, we got a glimpse of it from some videos that they posted of practice recently. Hopefully everybody can kind of just remember the first team offensive line, what it was throughout the season. I guess I can go through it real quick. Will Campbell at left tackle, Garrett Dellinger at left guard until he got hurt. Center was DJ Chester, right guard Miles Frazier, right tackle Emory Jones. This is now what it looked like recently during practice. Left tackle Tyree Adams, left guard Paul Mavinga, center DJ Chester, right guard Bo Bordelon, right tackle Miles Frazier. They kicked him out to right tackle, position he played a few years ago, but hasn't really recently at LSU. That's Bordelon would be making his first career start. Tyree Adams would be making his second career start. And again, Frazier kicking out to guard, a position he hasn't played in a couple of years. Kicking out to tackle. Like that offensive line is going to look very different, as are the weapons that Garrett Nussmeier is throwing to. He's got Aaron Anderson. He's got Xavier Thomas. He's got Chris Hilton. But three of his top four targets probably aren't playing in this game. We don't know, I guess, 100% definitively about Kyron Lacey, but I don't think he's going to be playing. And so, with him, we already know that Mason Taylor is headed to the draft. He's not playing in this game. And then CJ Daniels into the transfer portal, ended up transferring to Miami. And so that's a bunch of your starters on the offensive side of the ball who aren't playing in this game. Now, you've still got some guys who would certainly promise, but guys are just going to have to step up. We saw Chris Hilton is playing in this game. We saw what he can do when he's healthy in that regular season finale against Oklahoma. So maybe that can make a real difference here. We've got Trades Green playing in this game. Maybe he has takes a step forward going into his sophomore year, going into the offseason. But you're going to need that. You're going to need those offensive linemen who are really playing together for the first time in this configuration to really play well in order to give Garrett Nussmeier enough time to get to the ball to those guys. So it's going to be interesting to see what LSU is able to accomplish offensively, because they have a lot of missing pieces from this year's team now playing here in the Texas Bowl.
Yeah, so that offensive line is like 2 out of 5 normal starters and only 1 out of 5 playing in his normal position. So it's going to be a little bit.
No, more than 1 out of 5 playing in their normal position, but yes, it's still it's a little bit wonky.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll see what happens, and we're going to have a full preview pod for the Texas Bowl next Monday. That's probably our next LSU Insider podcast. We'll take the rest of the week off unless something really big shakes out. May do an emergency episode Thursday or Friday, but probably the next time you see us will be next Monday for a Texas Bowl preview pod. Do want to let you know that you can catch all the sports action at the Queen Casino's DraftKings Sportsbook Bar and 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails. With top-notch screens and live betting, it's the ultimate spot to watch your favorite teams and enjoy a cold brew or a signature cocktail. The Queen Casino is the only land-based casino in Baton Rouge and your go-to for game day or any day. And finally, Wilson, we would be remiss if we did not talk a little bit about the CFP. We'll go around the CFP with Classic Industrial Services, where every minute matters. Every minute did not matter in those first 4 games. There was a lot of garbage time at the end. The 4 home teams win big. The closest game by score actually ended up being the first one, where Indiana kind of had 2 late touchdowns to make it 27-17, but that was not as competitive as the score would indicate. Penn State blows out SMU. Texas, I think, kind of sleptwalked through the third quarter and let Clemson back in the game, but they ultimately put their foot down. And then Ohio State, maybe the biggest surprise, just blew the doors off of Tennessee. So we have 4 favorites moving on. It sets up some pretty good quarterfinal matchups, probably first and foremost, the Oregon-Ohio State rematch at the Rose Bowl. Also, Georgia-Notre Dame and the Sugar Bowl is going to be a great game. And then a couple of, on paper at least, mismatches where you have the teams that got buys, Boise State, Arizona State, are big underdogs against Penn State and Texas. So this system is fun. I still think it needs some tweaking, and I think the first round showed that to us. What say you?
I think it's a good way of putting it, because there was so much online discourse about, oh, well, Indiana shouldn't have been in, and then, well, Tennessee should have been in, and like it got really silly. What I think it showed us is 12 is the number. You shouldn't go over 12, because 13, 14, 15, 16, are they really going to do any better? Alabama and South Carolina and Ole Miss, these were 3-loss teams that laid some real eggs during the season, and they didn't. I think Nicole Auerbach put this really well. I guess it was Friday night, or maybe it was Saturday. But basically, what you do before Selection Sunday determines whether or not you're deserving. And then after that, it's not like revisionist history. It doesn't. Whatever happens in the playoff doesn't mean you weren't deserving of being in and shouldn't have been the team that was in. I think all 4 of those teams getting blown out the way that they did doesn't prove that any one of those 3-loss SEC teams should have been in. It just proves that the system probably needs, like you said, the seeding probably needs some tweaking in some ways. And the other thing would be, because maybe it's more competitive if Boise State or Arizona State are playing the first round, and that kind of almost contradictory to what I was just saying. But I think that's probably the takeaway, because the other thing was, it looked awesome on television having all these games on campus. I mean, that has got to stay. It would be so cool if they maybe even continue to sort of take some of the bowl element out of it, and the quarterfinals get played on campus. That would be something that would be really cool too. Like those top 4 seeds. I mean, you should probably earn a home game too. Imagine what kind of difference it would make if Oregon and Georgia were playing home field games on their home field, especially Georgia with a backup quarterback most likely in Gunnar Stockton going into this game. It would probably help them as a top seed that's earned that spot to play at home versus playing in the Sugar Bowl. I think those would maybe some of my takeaways from this. Is the home game is awesome. Let's have some more of that, and let's just tweak the seeding. But please do not go more than 12. You continue to devalue the regular season if you do that, and also 13 through 16 probably wouldn't do a whole lot better. The thing about it is, with all these blowouts that maybe people are forgetting, is like, wow, all these blowups in the first round. What is this, the 14 playoff? Because we saw this all the time. Right. Like we saw this all the time in that system too. And we might see some more in the quarterfinals, but hopefully we at least get a couple of really good games in the quarterfinals. Especially, I would feel like we will with Ohio State and Oregon and Georgia and Notre Dame. I'd be surprised if those 2 were blowouts. The others 2 wouldn't shock me if they were blowouts, but I'm also rooting for Boise State, for Arizona State to cover in those games, if not win outright, and throw some more fun into the mix.
For sure. I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think maybe one thing you could do is that the top 4 conference champions don't have to get buys, because that's where this unbalancing of the bracket really takes place, where Ohio State and Oregon should not be in the same quarter of the bracket. And I know Ohio State lost the game to Michigan late and dropped them, kind of did it to themselves, but Oregon should not have to face Ohio State in their first playoff game.
But here, what's the solution though? Like, it feels like I think everybody's like, okay, we need to tweak the seeding, but I don't know how you do it, because then you take away the conference championship games mattering, and they probably still should, but it's tough when conferences have gotten so bloated and conference realignment has kind of done this to us. Where I don't know what the solution is necessarily to that. I don't know what the tweak would be.
I'll offer this, and I don't know if this is perfect, but if you guarantee the top 4 conference champions home games, but not necessarily top 4 seeds, then you set up this fun scenario, first of all, where they may not get a bye. They may have to play in the first round, but Tennessee or Clemson or someone has to go to Boise State, a place where they would never play normally, but now they've got to go out there and play. So you give the conference champions home games, but not necessarily buys. So they get the advantage of being at home, which may make the games more competitive. And we kind of get to see some fun matchups. Again, I don't know if that's the perfect solution, but to me, it's better than having a 3 seed like Boise State that, any computer ranking would tell you, any composite Vegas ranking would tell you they're clearly not the 3rd best team in the country.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea, actually, because you still have a incentive to win your conference championship game, but you also, like you said, maybe your 3 and your 4 seeds are a little bit different. Maybe Notre Dame's a 3 seed, or because they certainly played like they would be deserving of something like that, 3 or 4 seed, or even Ohio. Yeah. Now, the one thing is the amount of arguing over who deserves those, how that seeding would look, would be insufferable. But it's college football, so I don't think that we're going to get rid of that in any way.
Oh, come on, it already is. And it's insufferable, but we also can't live without it. It's just part of the college football fabric. Okay, so that's going to do it for our show. Today's episode of LSU Sports Insider was brought to you by Classic Industrial Services, proudly serving Louisiana and the entire United States. From large capital projects to commercial projects or your small quick response needs, Classic Industrial is your go-to for quality and safety. They're not just about business, they're a proud community partner, supporting local initiatives and helping build a stronger Baton Rouge. Because at Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. Wilson, Merry Christmas to you and to all of our viewers, and happy holidays to however you may celebrate. We'll, as I said, probably be back next Monday. You guys up for a Texas Bowl preview from Houston there?
Absolutely. There's a game to play.
Yeah, let's do it. One more game in LSU's 2024 season, and then we'll throw in some more CFP talk with the quarterfinals coming up right after that too. So we'll see you in a week. Merry Christmas to everybody, and to all a good afternoon.